a deliberately planned false flag or whether it is accidental or a blowback or an unintended consequence, it's always used to expand the state.
Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. I've personally been buying gold and silver from JM Bullion for over 2 years. They offer the best prices over spot that I can find, and I've never had a problem with an order. If you're looking to trade in some of your fiat paper for real money, check out jmbullion.com today. Prepping for the apocalypse can be expensive, but it doesn't have to be. The new book, Dirt Cheap Valuable Prepping by Cal Wilson, focuses on inexpensive ways to make the most out of your survival budget. Don't create your own financial crisis long before the collapse. Get your copy of Dirt Cheap Valuable Prepping for Kindle or in paperback at Amazon.com. Today's guest is Bruce Forster. Bruce was on the show not long ago to tell us about his backup power system, the GoVolt. Bruce, welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
Now, how are things coming along with the production of the GoVolt?
Well, I've got two 2,000-watt models ready for sale. There's been a few interviews from local papers, and I did show them at a classic car show this past weekend. A few people appeared to be very legitimately interested, but no one's opened their checkbook as yet. I believe the things would sell if I could show them to the right people. For example, I'd really like to show them at a prepper conference. I think the machines would do a lot better there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's usually where you'll get the people that are ready for that stuff. Now, besides being a bit of a backup power guru, you also teach a class at your church about preparedness. Can you give us a few pointers from that class?
Sure. The way I start the class is to have several items set out on a table in the front of the room. These range from a few canned food items to small packages of batteries to reading glasses, notebooks, and even a few first aid items. I direct the audience to study these items for a moment, and then I ask if anyone can tell me what each of these items have in common with the others. To date, no one has ever hit on the correct answer, and the answer is everything on this table costs $1 or less. From that moment on, I own them for the entire hour, because now they understand that it is possible to begin becoming prepared for emergencies without breaking the bank. This stimulates thoughtful questions from my audience, and this is what I want for them, to realize that they too can do this.
Now, back to the subject of backup power. What's the best place to buy fuel stabilizers? Because they don't really sell that in the dollar store, and that's something that every prepper needs. Do you think just the auto store, is that the best place to buy it?
Okay, I thought about that. I personally will not buy the stuff from the auto parts stores, and that's what I refer to it as, because it's got all kinds of other additives and things that can actually be harmful to your fuel and or your vehicle. What I do is, and there's a local marine supply house, or what some people will call a boating store here, and they've got the best fuel stabilizers out there and the knowledgeable people to deal with any questions you might have. Spend the extra $5 at the dedicated marine store. You'll get a better product, you'll get a safer product, and you will not be sorry.
And the one that you'd be referring to in the auto supply stores, would that be Sta-Bil? Is that the one that you don't like?
Sta-Bil, that's about the only thing that I would buy from an auto parts store. I wouldn't buy anything else. And again, I'm fortunate to have a marine supply store here, and I buy the stuff that they recommend for boats. And it's just better all the way around, and it's really not that much more money.
And now there's another one that's called Seafoam, and it's sort of like it will act as a fuel stabilizer, but also, especially if you had a generator that's maybe been sitting around for a couple of years, it'll kind of help clean it out if you're not as regular with your maintenance as you should be, which I know that's not anybody in our audience. I know that everybody in our audience always rotates their food and their stockpile, and they always change their spark plugs and their generators, and they do everything that they're supposed to do. But, me as the host of the show, I don't always do all of that stuff. So, do you like Seafoam? Do you think that's a good thing to have maybe for if you haven't fired up your generator for a little while?
Well, the best way I can answer that is I've heard of Seafoam. I have no personal experience with it, so I'm really not qualified to give an opinion on it. But I have heard good things about it. So my suggestion there would be to, again, consult a mechanic that you trust or a marine specialist, somebody who really knows about that stuff. But from what I've heard, I think it'd be a good thing.
And I do run it in my my lawnmower, and it seems like it does pretty good. And I'll just add a little bit once in a while just to sort of clean out the engine, and it seems like it works really well.
Okay.
Now back to your classes. Do you ever find people in your classes that are not really taking their pets into consideration in regards to their preps?
That's a good question. In my experience, most people neglect the preparations for their pets, and they don't mean to. It's a really horrible thing, and Katrina was the biggest case in point. I personally saw some things that I'm ex-military, and I saw some things that brought me to tears. Anyway, some people are beginning to become aware of that, but in my opinion, not enough. There are some exceptions to that, and I believe Patriot Nurse has touched on the subject a little bit. I'd like to see her do more on this from a medical perspective. I think she could be very helpful to people. I can't say enough about the importance of having a loving pet in your life, especially if you happen to be single. I'm in year 28 with my wife, and I won't give her up. But that being said, if we didn't have our pets, there'd be a big empty place in my life. So, yes, we do have several months' supply of pet food on hand, and we have books on emergency pet care.
And then besides the unconditional love that a pet can give, even a small dog could be sort of an effective alarm system. Would you agree?
In my humble opinion, the best burglar alarm you can buy is a Chihuahua. Seriously, a dog or dogs are of incalculable value. A few years ago, we were just climbing into bed when our current dog alerted. We didn't hear anything, but I decided to look outside anyway. Sure enough, there was a car nose down in the ditch at the far end of our property. I walked over to see what had happened, and an intoxicated female had gotten lost and while turning around drove into our ditch. She wasn't hurt, and she asked me for directions. The town she was asking about wasn't even in our state. My wife called the state police, and the driver was taken into custody for DUI. Had it not been for the dog, we wouldn't have known what had happened. So, yes, if you're able to have a dog, by all means, do so. Studies have also shown that even if you don't have any pets, a beware of dog sign on your porch or at the end of your driveway will usually make the bad guys think twice.
And also having a pet around, if you've got small children and you've got a pet, a lot of times that'll give them, if you do have sort of a collapse type scenario, it'll give them something to focus on besides the problem. Do you think that could be a good sort of a plus mentally for that reason?
In any disaster situation, and I'm drawing from my experience as a fire department medic, anything that you can have in a disaster that resembles any form of normalcy is healthy, especially for children. It can serve to let them realize that, hey, yeah, it'll be bad, but it's not the end of the world. Hopefully mom and dad are still around, and our doggy is still here, or our kitty is still around, and we still have our games. And so absolutely anything that you can keep in a disaster that even resembles normal before the disaster happened is going to be helpful, not just during the disaster, but during the recovery and in the long run. It's just a good thing to have.
Very good to know. Do you have any good tips for long-term water storage for, trying to do that on a budget?
Wow. My answer to this is going to echo a lot of other people. but because water is so important, I'll talk about it anyway. Like most people, we can't afford a Berkey filter, so what I'm doing is this. When I can, I'll buy a good 5 or 7 gallon water container and a little unscented bleach and set it in a cool, darkened shed. A lot of folks can clean out and use the 2-liter soda bottles for their water storage. I use the 3-liter bottles when I can find them, and while these may not be the perfect container for water storage, according to some experts, there's nothing wrong with them. We also have a Katahdin water filter, which I keep for the house, and the wife and I each have a life straw in our emergency kits. As every expert I have talked to will tell you, if you don't have drinkable water and or the means to get it, nothing else you do in getting prepared is going to matter.
Yeah, it's very true. And milk jugs are probably maybe the worst thing to possibly store water in because it's such a thin plastic that you might be able to store them outside in a shed or something for maybe 6 months, but they're going to probably deteriorate. I guess if it was the only thing you had, it would be better than nothing. But like you said, the soda bottles are so much thicker plastic, and those you can store for a long time. And of course, I think that if you're storing tap water and you put a little cap full of bleach in there, they'll store a whole lot longer. But you still might want to rotate that out every year or two and refill those. Would you agree?
I tend to rotate our water every 6 to 8 months. That may not be necessary, but I do it anyway. It's also possible to aerate water, and for anybody listening who doesn't know what that means, is you can take a stored container of water and then another empty container, and you can pour the water back and forth between those 2 bottles several times, and it'll reoxygenate the water, and it'll taste fine.
Oh, very good to know. I had never heard of that. That's great. That's part of the reason I do this show is because I'm sort of a serial learner, and so I love it when I get a new tip that I didn't know about, and that's just fantastic. Now, communications. This is one of the things that people think can't be done on a budget because all this stuff's just so expensive, and I don't have the money for that right now. But I guess the only thing that's more expensive than a good communications plan is no communications plan. Do you have a good tip for how we can cover comms on a budget?
Well, yeah, pretty much. I've been hearing a lot about the little Baofangs and the Wouxun. Some people call them Woxon, but they're pronounced Wouxun. I don't like them for one reason. They're nearly impossible to program without a computer, their USB cable, and software. That having been said, I won't discourage anybody from owning one, and I don't really intend to badmouth them. I just don't personally like them. But the radios themselves, there's nothing wrong with them. If you are able to program them or have them programmed for you, they are extremely reliable based on my contacts with hands who own them, and they do sound fabulous over the air. Their transmit audio is excellent. I've got a friend who has one of the Baofeng UV5Rs, and he got it for $35 on eBay. This past Saturday, the vice president of our local ham radio club programmed it and several others for people at our monthly meeting. Depending on where you live, these radios can be had new for anywhere from $50 to $90. They are a lot of bang for the buck, and if I needed a radio right now and had little money, I'd get one of these radios. As in every area of prepping, and to reference what you pointed out right at the beginning of this question, something is better than nothing.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Cady Armor offers affordable body armor, including level 3 trauma plates made of AR-500 steel. They can endure multiple rounds from pistols and rifles up to 7.62 NATO. Their plates are available with Rhino Linings coatings to reduce SPA. Go to CadyArmor.com, that's C-A-T-I armor.com today.
When disaster strikes, it's too late to prepare. PrepperRecon.com offers MOLLE-compatible individual first aid kits for your home, auto, or bug-out bag. These kits have everything you need to address a traumatic injury, including an Israeli battle dressing, quick clot, EMT shears, suture kit, Steri-strips, tourniquet, ACS chest seal, tough strip bandages, gauze, and so much more. $89 includes shipping. To buy your individual first aid kit, go to to PrepperRecon.com and click the store tab at the top of the homepage. Order today before it's too late.
We had another bad winter. It doesn't look like global warming is going to pan out. So do you have some cheap sources of backup heat?
Well, if you'll excuse the pun, this is a hot topic. I'm not a... Sorry. Had to throw something in there. I'm not an expert in this area by any stretch of the imagination. Where you live is going to be the determining factor on how you get your heat and how much you're going to pay for it. My heart truly goes out to the people outside Oregon or Washington or Northern California right now. Out here we've had one of the mildest winters on record. About the cheapest source of heat I can think of right now is a good fireplace or a wood stove. The wood stove, of course, being the better of the two. I've seen ads for the outside wood furnaces with a blower system to send heat into the home, and I love the concept. Though not cheap to buy, if you have access to a lot of wood, heating does become relatively inexpensive. You have to put a little labor into it, but most people can take an axe or a saw and obtain their own wood. In a true emergency, the local county or state government can take their wood-cutting permit and put it where the sun doesn't shine. For apartment or condo dwellers, this could be a major issue. My suggestion there is to do what we did. We live in a very small house that doesn't allow for a fireplace or a wood stove, so we bought an indoor kerosene heater along with a carbon monoxide detector for our heat. Look for the heaters that are UL approved for indoor use. In our area, we pay anywhere from $35 to $43 for a 5-gallon bucket, depending on whether or not it's on sale. And this will give us heat for 10 to 14 days, depending on how cold it is. One very important thing I want your listeners to know about kerosene heating is this, and I can't overemphasize this. Do not buy the kerosene with the dye in it under any circumstance whatsoever. Buy only the clear kerosene. Look for the K1 clear designator on the bucket. 11 years ago, we bought some of the dyed kerosene, and it destroyed the wick. It also smoked and stunk up the house to high heaven. The clear does cost anywhere from $3 to $5 more for a 5-gallon bucket than the dyed stuff, but you'll spare yourself a lot of grief and expense. And while a kerosene heater is not necessarily cheap, one of the reasons we bought it, and I'm very thankful that we did, is that they will give you heat when the grid is out.
Yeah, and that's really, really important. We talked about how important water was. But if you're in a cold climate, you could say the same thing for heat. If you don't have a way of staying warm when it's getting below zero, none of your other preps are going to matter. Your water's not going to matter much because it's probably going to be frozen if you don't have a source of heat.
Good point.
Now, those long winters also mean that there's not much daylight. What's a cheap way to provide illumination?
LED, baby. One method that I've used is to buy a small 10 to 20 amp hour lead-acid battery. I say lead-acid because they can be had on the cheap. A good place to find those is an electronic surplus store. Out near Hillsboro, Oregon, which is a little bit west of Portland, is a place called Gizmos. For the listeners in our neck of the woods, they're on Cornelius Pass Road, just north of U.S. Highway 26. They also have the huge 200 amp hour gel cell batteries if you're looking to set up a solar power system. But I digress. You can buy one of the little 10 amp batteries, a 10 watt solar panel, and a small charge controller along with a few 15 watt 12 volt LED lights, wires, connectors, and switches. If you shop wisely, you can have a very reliable small scale emergency lighting system for a one-time investment of $150 or less. So with this and the kerosene heater, you can have heat and light in a grid-down event.
Oh, that's really, really smart. Now, I wonder if Gizmos ships if they're available to purchase stuff from them online. Do you know?
I've not asked, but I've talked to the owners. They're very reasonable people, so they probably would do it. And I regret I don't have a phone number here for you.
All right. Well, maybe we'll get it and get it in the show notes. What about?
I can mail it to you.
Okay, sounds good. What about cooking? Okay. Any cheap alternatives besides campfire?
Cheap? Well, not necessarily relative relatively inexpensive, yes. I'm sure most folks have heard of the little Esbit folding stoves and their knockoffs. I've got an Esbit stove in my emergency kit along with 40 of the little fuel tablets. I paid $5 for my little stove and have been able to buy the 24-tab fuel packets for around $7. The way I use mine is to set up the stove with the pot on it, light one tab instead of two. I do this to extend my burn time with the tablets. When the first tab is about a third burned, I add the second tab. At this point, I do have two tabs burning, heating my water and or my food. When number 2 is a third down, I add tab number 3. This has always worked for me. Using this method, I've cooked my meals with just 3 tabs instead of the 4 that people would normally use. Another way to extend the fuel tablets is to have several small dried sticks about 2 inches long and a 1/4 inch in diameter. I carry several of those little sticks in my emergency kit. Once the first fuel tab is going, I'll add 1 or 2 sticks to the fire. Once those are going, I'll add up to 5 more, depending on what I may need at any given time. This saves me even more money on cooking fuel, and yes, I have used these fuel tabs to start a campfire in wet condition. I'm a big proponent of multiple uses for my preparedness items.
And it makes a great thing addition for a bug out bag, because there's always the odds that you're bugging out and you don't necessarily want to be sending up smoke signals. And if you're going to have to cook your food over a big, huge campfire, you're going to be making a lot of excess light. You're going to be making a lot of excess smoke and broadcasting your position all over. And one of those little stoves, while it's still going to have some emissions, it's going to have a lot less of a footprint from a light and smoke standpoint than a campfire.
Well, another thing you can do with those little Esbit stoves, or any of the stoves for that matter, and I think Soul Survivor has talked about this a little bit on her channel, is you can put up a little windscreen or something around it, or a little piece of aluminum foil or some other reflective stuff, and that serves 2 purposes. One, it blocks the light from one side of the stove if you want to have a little bit more privacy, and it also will reflect some of that other heat back at you, so you're kind of getting 2 benefits at one time.
And then for folks that may have missed your last interview, the last time you were on the show, can you just real quickly go over what the GoVolt is and what you can do with it, and if somebody's interested in getting one, how do they get a hold of you to purchase one? Okay.
I'm not able to ship the larger units, but I do have a briefcase size now. It's perfected. Boy, how do I really describe the thing? It's a portable backup emergency power system. It can be charged via solar, from a motor vehicle, from a gas or diesel generator, from a wind setup if you happen to have one, and from a good old-fashioned battery charger. The briefcase one runs for $350 plus shipping, and I haven't worked out the shipping yet because the thing weighs almost 26 pounds. But it has a 10 amp hour gel cell battery, deep cycle, a 27 watt LED floodlight, a smart charger, and a 400 watt inverters, a couple of power cords and jumpers, and it's just very effective. The larger one is in a rolling, rigid, professional toolbox. It has a 2,000 watt inverter, a Group 31 marine deep cycle battery. Let's see, what else does it have? A lot of power routing controls. It has what's called a rig runner. It's essentially a Anderson power pole connector power strip, so you can run all kinds of the newer devices on it. Let's see, and it comes with a 100 watt solar panel, and it is selling now for $24.95. And if you do happen to live within 200 miles of me, and in the case of this interview, I'll go 300 miles one way. I will deliver the unit.
Can't beat that.
And one other thing I wanted to mention, I haven't had any returned, but if anybody ever does, if there's a issue with them and you call the number that I provide, you don't get a technician, you don't get somebody in India or God knows wherever. That's my home phone number, and if you have a problem or a question, you get me.
Very cool. And what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Okay, there are 2 ways. I'm going to go ahead and give my home phone number. It's area code 503-325-7161. And my wife and I live in Astoria, Oregon. It's about 120 miles west of Portland, right on the coast. And the email is ebxrocks@yahoo.com.
Very cool. And we got a lot of listeners in the eastern side of Washington, so most of those guys would probably be in that delivery zone there. So any folks up there listening, definitely a great thing for you to check out. Bruce, thanks again for taking time to come on the show. You've just really given us a lot of great stuff to think about, some great tips for prepping on a budget.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And one thing I would like to add, it might be a little bit more than the 300 miles, but given the circumstances, I will personally deliver the units anywhere in Oregon or Washington.
Very cool. Very cool. Thanks again so much.
Hey, thank you, sir.
In the Days of Noah, Book 2, Persecution by best-selling author Mark Goodwin. A globalist conspiracy transpires by way of a false flag attack against America's energy infrastructure. Noah and Cassandra Parker witness a complete economic meltdown, which is intentionally triggered by the event. The assault is blamed on patriots and Christians who are rounded up into detention centers across the country. Noah and his friends must take action to prepare for the meltdown and defend against the totalitarian regime, which is gunning for their freedom and, quite possibly, their very lives. Get your copy of The Days of Noah, Book 2, Persecution for Kindle, paperback or audio edition at Amazon.com today.